David had always been the guy everyone could count on. You know, the type always on time, always prepared, always had his life together. He worked as a lawyer at one of those big firms downtown, the kind with glass windows that stretched up to the clouds and conference rooms bigger than most people's apartments. He had a nice place in the city, paid his bills before they were due, and never left work undone. Life was good. Life was stable. Life was exactly how he'd planned it. Then everything fell apart in the worst way possible. His law firm collapsed overnight. One of the senior partners had been stealing money for years, and when it all came out, the whole company went down like a house of cards. David hadn't done anything wrong, but it didn't matter. When your workplace is on the news for all the wrong reasons, your name gets dragged through the mud too. Suddenly, nobody wanted to hire the lawyer from that firm. He had to hire his own attorney just to prove he wasn't involved in the mess. That ate up most of his savings. Within 2 months, David went from having everything figured out to sleeping on his younger sister's couch. The apartment was gone. The savings were gone. His reputation was hanging by a thread. He'd wake up at odd hours, staring at his sister's ceiling, wondering how his life had turned into such a disaster. The worst part wasn't even the money or the job. It was the fear, the constant, gnawing fear that he'd never get back up, that this was it, that he peaked at 32 and now it was all downhill. He stopped answering calls from old friends. He couldn't bear to explain what happened one more time. He couldn't stand the pity in their voices. His girlfriend, Rachel, had been with him for 2 years. 2 good years, actually. She was doing well in her career, working in marketing for a tech company that kept promoting her. She was smart, driven, and had her own life together. At first, when everything crashed, she seemed okay with it. She'd say things like, "We'll get through this, and it's just a rough patch." But David knew better. He'd seen this story before. People don't stick around for the fall. They stick around for the rise, for the good times, for the success. But when things get ugly, when you're sleeping on a borrowed couch and can't afford to take your girlfriend out for dinner, that's when people leave, and honestly, David didn't blame them. Why would anyone choose to be part of a sinking ship? He started preparing himself for the breakup. Every time Rachel called, he thought, this is it. This is when she tells me she can't do this anymore. Every time she suggested meeting up, he assumed she wanted to have the talk. He practiced what he'd say in his head, how he'd tell her it was okay, that he understood, that she deserved better. He'd make it easy for her. That's what a good person does, right? 3 months into his disaster, Rachel texted him on a Tuesday afternoon. "Can I come by tonight? We need to talk." David's heart sank. There it was, the message he'd been dreading. "We need to talk" never meant anything good. He told his sister to give them some privacy that evening. He took a shower for the first time in 3 days. He tried to prepare himself mentally for the end. It was raining that evening. One of those heavy rains that makes everything gray and gloomy. Perfect weather for a breakup, he thought bitterly, when the doorbell rang. David took a deep breath and opened the door. Rachel stood there, soaking wet, with 2 big suitcases beside her. For a second, he was confused. Why would she bring luggage? To break up with someone? She pulled the suitcases inside, water dripping everywhere. His sister's cat ran away, startled by the commotion. Rachel pushed her wet hair back from her face and looked at David with this expression. He couldn't quite read. Determination, maybe? Or something close to it. "I'm moving in," she said simply. David blinked. "What? Here? I'm moving in here. With you. Rachel, this isn't even my place. This is my sister's apartment. There's barely room for. I already talked to your sister. She said it's fine for a while. We'll figure something else out later." David felt like his brain had stopped working. This wasn't how this was supposed to go. You're not breaking up with me?" Rachel looked at him like he'd said something ridiculous. "Why would I break up with you? Because of all this." He gestured around the small apartment, at his wrinkled clothes, at everything his life had become. "Because I'm a mess. Because I have nothing to offer you right now. Because any smart person would run away from this situation." "Well, maybe I'm not smart then," Rachel said, but she was smiling a little, Or maybe everyone else has it wrong. Rachel, you have your own place, your own life. Your career is going great. Why would you give that up to squeeze into a guest room with a guy who can't even afford to buy groceries? She set down her bags and walked over to him, because that's not how this works. That's not how we work. You think I'm with you because you had a nice apartment and a fancy job? You think that's all you were to me? I don't know, David admitted. Maybe, let's be real. Nobody signs up for this. He gestured at himself. Look at me. I'm falling apart. Then we'll put you back together, Rachel said firmly. But I'm not watching from the sidelines. I'm not going to sit in my comfortable apartment and send you encouraging text messages while you drown. That's not what love is supposed to be. David felt something crack inside his chest. You're crazy. This is crazy. Probably, she agreed. But I'm not going anywhere. So you might as well get used to having me around. That night, after Rachel had unpacked her things into the already cramped guest room, David lay awake beside her, still trying to process what had happened. She'd fallen asleep quickly, exhausted from moving and from work. But he couldn't sleep. He kept thinking about what she'd done. She'd left her nice apartment. She moved into a cramped space. With him, she'd chosen chaos and uncertainty over comfort and stability. And she'd done it without him even asking, without him even hoping for it, really, because he'd assumed it was impossible. For the first time in months, David felt something other than fear and shame. He felt confused, mostly, but also something else, something that might have been hope, though he was afraid to call it that. Hope felt dangerous. Hope felt like setting yourself up for disappointment. But as he listened to Rachel breathing softly beside him in the darkness, he thought maybe, just maybe, he'd been wrong about how this story was supposed to go. Maybe not everyone leaves when things get hard. Maybe some people actually mean it when they say they're with you for better or worse, even before any wedding vows are spoken. He still didn't understand why she'd stayed. He didn't think he deserved it. But she was here, and that was something. That was everything, actually. The next morning, David woke up and thought maybe he'd dreamed the whole thing. But no, there was Rachel's suitcase in the corner, her jacket hanging on the back of the door, her phone charging on the nightstand. She was already awake, sitting on the edge of the bed, scrolling through her phone, mourning. She said, like this was totally normal, like she hadn't just turned her whole life upside down. Within 2 days, Rachel's decision became the talk of everyone they knew. David's sister pulled Rachel aside while he was in the shower. Are you sure about this? She asked. I love my brother, but you don't owe him anything. You have your own life. Rachel just smiled. I know I don't owe him anything. That's not why I'm here. But not everyone was so gentle about it. Rachel's mother stopped calling her. Just completely stopped. When Rachel finally called her mom, the conversation was short and cold. You're making a huge mistake, her mother said. You're throwing away your future for a man who can't even take care of himself. What happens when he drags you down with him? He's not dragging me anywhere, Mom. I'm choosing this. Then you're choosing wrong. The call ended there. Rachel's best friend, Lisa, was even more direct. She showed up at the apartment unannounced a week later, asked David to leave them alone for a bit, and then proceeded to tell Rachel exactly what she thought. This is insane, Lisa said, pacing in the tiny living room. You're a smart woman. You have a great job, a great future. Why are you doing this? Because I love him. Love isn't enough. Love doesn't pay bills. Love doesn't fix depression. Love doesn't rebuild a career. You're not a rehabilitation center, Rachel. You're not responsible for fixing broken men. That phrase hit Rachel hard. Broken men. Like David was something damaged beyond repair, something not worth the effort. He's not broken, Rachel said quietly. He's going through something terrible. There's a difference, is there? Lisa crossed her arms. Because from where I'm standing, you're sacrificing everything for someone who might never get back on his feet. What if this is who he is now? What if he never gets another good job? What if he stays depressed? Are you prepared to carry both of you for the rest of your life? I don't know, Rachel admitted. But I know that if I walk away now, I'll regret it forever. I'll always wonder if I gave up too soon. or you look back and thank God you escaped while you still could. Lisa left that day still convinced Rachel was making a terrible mistake. Other friends were more subtle about it, but the message was the same. You're too young to tie yourself to someone else's problems. Make sure you're taking care of yourself first. It's okay to put yourself first. Everyone had an opinion, and almost all of them said the same thing: save yourself. Even strangers at the coffee shop where Rachel worked remotely sometimes made comments. When she explained her situation to the barista, one day she had become a regular. Working from there to give David space in the apartment, the woman gave her a sympathetic look. "Oh, honey, that's rough, but don't let him hold you back, okay? Men come and go, but your career is yours." Rachel stopped explaining after that. It was exhausting defending a decision that felt so right to her, but looked so wrong to everyone else. The pressure wasn't just external, though. David himself kept trying to push her away. Not in obvious ways. He wasn't mean or deliberately cruel, but he'd make comments. "You could have gone to that work dinner if you weren't stuck here with me. Or your apartment probably misses you. Still time to go back." Or the worst one: "You know you don't have to do this, right? I'd understand if you left." One night, about 3 weeks in, they had their first real fight. David had been especially quiet all day, barely responding when Rachel tried to talk to him. Finally, she'd had enough. "What's going on with you?" "Nothing. Don't give me that. You've barely said 2 words all day." David sighed. I don't get it, okay? I don't understand why you're here. I've told you why. No, you said you love me. But that's not enough of a reason to do what you're doing. Love doesn't mean you have to sacrifice everything." Rachel felt her frustration rising. "Who says I'm sacrificing everything? Rachel, you left your apartment to live in a guest room. You're using your savings to cover both of us because I barely have any money coming in. You're dealing with your mom not speaking to you and your friends thinking you're crazy. All for what? For a guy who might never get his life back together. For a guy I want to build a life with," Rachel corrected. "There's a difference. But what if I can't? What if this is it? What if I'm never that person you fell in love with again?" Rachel was quiet for a moment. When she spoke, her voice was softer. "The person I fell in love with is still here. You're just going through hell right now. And yeah, maybe you're different. Maybe we both will be after this. But that doesn't mean we won't be good. Just different." David shook his head. "Everyone says you should leave. Everyone thinks this is a bad idea. What if they're right? And what if they're wrong?" Rachel shot back. "What if everyone is so obsessed with protecting themselves that they forget what it means to actually be there for someone? What if all these rules about boundaries and self-preservation are just excuses to abandon people when things get hard? Or what if those rules exist for a reason? What if they protect people from getting hurt?" "I'm not afraid of getting hurt, David. I'm afraid of not trying. I'm afraid of walking away and spending the rest of my life wondering if I gave up on something real." They didn't really resolve anything that night. David went to bed feeling guilty and confused. Rachel went to bed feeling exhausted and uncertain. But she didn't leave. She woke up the next morning and went to work from the coffee shop. She came home and made dinner. She kept choosing to stay, day after day, even when everyone told her she shouldn't. What nobody seemed to understand, what Rachel was only beginning to understand herself, was that this wasn't about being selfless or sacrificial. It wasn't about being a martyr or a savior. She wasn't staying because she thought she could fix David. She was staying because she believed their relationship was worth fighting for, even when the fighting was hard and lonely and made everyone question her judgment. She was breaking all the rules. The rules that said you should never combine finances when things are unstable. The rules that said you should maintain your own space and independence. The rules that said you should protect yourself first, always, above everything else. The rules that said a strong woman doesn't let a man's problems become her problems. But Rachel was starting to think maybe those rules were written by people who'd never found something worth breaking the rules for. Maybe those rules worked for some people, but they didn't work for her. Not in this situation. Not with David. Still, it was lonely. Being the only one who believed in what you were doing was incredibly lonely. And sometimes, late at night, Rachel wondered if everyone else was right, if she was being naive or foolish or codependent, if she'd regret this choice someday. But then morning would come, and she'd make that choice again. Because the alternative, leaving David alone in his darkness, felt worse than any risk she was taking. By the third month, things got really bad. Like, worse than Rachel had expected, and she'd expected it to be hard. David wasn't just sad anymore. He'd fallen into something deeper, something darker. He'd spend entire days in bed, not sleeping exactly, just lying there staring at nothing. He'd skip meals, go days without showering. The apartment smelled stale, like sadness had a scent. Rachel would come home from work. She'd been working remotely mostly, but sometimes she had to go into the office and find him exactly where she'd left him. Same position, same blank expression. It was like watching someone slowly disappear right in front of her eyes. "Did you eat today?" She'd ask. Sometimes he'd nod. Usually he'd just shrug. "Did you leave the room at all?" Silence. The job rejections weren't helping. David had sent out maybe 50 applications by this point. Some companies didn't even respond. Others would schedule interviews, then ghost him after they did their background check and saw his previous employer. One interviewer actually asked him point blank, "So, were you involved in that whole embezzlement thing?" Even after David explained he'd been cleared, the interview ended 5 minutes later. Each rejection hit him harder than the last. Rachel could see him shrinking, becoming smaller and smaller. The confident man she'd fallen in love with was buried under layers of shame and hopelessness. And she didn't know how to reach him anymore. She tried everything. She'd suggest going for walks. He'd refuse. She'd try to get him to watch movies with her, cook with her, anything to get him engaged. Nothing worked. It was like he'd build a wall around himself, and she was on the outside banging on it uselessly. Then he started getting mean. Not physically, David would never do that, but his words got sharp, cutting, like he was trying to hurt her on purpose. One evening, Rachel came home excited because she'd gotten a promotion at work, a good one, with a significant raise. She thought maybe some good news would help lift the mood. She walked in smiling, ready to share the news. David was on the couch, looking at his phone, probably at job listings, or maybe just at nothing. "Hey, so I got some good news today." Rachel started. He looked up, barely interested. "Yeah, I got promoted. They're making me senior marketing manager. It comes with a pretty big raise too." She expected him to be happy, at least a little bit. Instead, his face hardened. "That's great," he said flatly. "At least one of us is going somewhere." Rachel felt like she'd been slapped. "What's that supposed to mean?" "Nothing. Congratulations." But his tone said the opposite. It said he was bitter, resentful, maybe even angry at her success. "David, what?" "I said congratulations. What more do you want?" "I want you to mean it." He laughed, but it wasn't a happy sound. "You want me to jump for joy while my life is in the toilet? While you're out there climbing the corporate ladder and I can't even get someone to call me back for an entry-level position? This isn't a competition." "You're right. It's not. Because you're winning and I've already lost." They fought more after that. Little things would set him off. Rachel would forget to buy something from the store, and he'd make a comment about how she was always too busy with work to remember things. She tried to suggest he talk to a therapist, and he'd snap that therapy was for people who could afford it and had problems that talking could fix. The worst part was that Rachel knew what he was doing. He was trying to push her away, trying to give her a reason to leave so he wouldn't have to feel guilty about her staying. But knowing why he was doing it didn't make it hurt less. One night, after a particularly bad fight where David had told her she was wasting her time on him, Rachel locked herself in the bathroom and cried. Not just little tears, full-on sobbing, the kind that makes your whole body shake. She was exhausted. Emotionally, physically, mentally exhausted. She was carrying her full-time job, trying to keep David afloat, dealing with her family not speaking to her, and now David himself was pushing her away. For the first time, she thought about leaving. Really thought about it. How much easier everything would be if she just went back to her old life. She could get her apartment back. Her friends would welcome her with open arms. Her mom would probably cry with relief. She could stop fighting this uphill battle every single day. She sat on the bathroom floor for maybe an hour, just thinking. The tile was cold. She could hear David moving around in the guest room, probably feeling bad about the fight but too proud or too depressed to apologize. Finally, she washed her face and went back out. David was sitting on the edge of the bed, head in his hands. "I'm sorry," he said without looking up. "I'm so sorry. I don't know why I said those things." Rachel sat down next to him, keeping a little distance between them. She was still hurt, still angry, still exhausted, but she was also still there. "Do you want me to leave?" she asked quietly. David was silent for a long time. When he finally spoke, his voice cracked. "Part of me thinks you should. Part of me thinks I'm being selfish keeping you here. But no, I don't want you to leave. I'm terrified of you leaving. Then stop trying to make me. I don't mean to. I hate myself right now, Rachel. I hate what I've become. I hate that you have to see me like this. And sometimes it feels easier to push you away than to let you see how pathetic I am. You're not pathetic. I can't even shower without you reminding me. I haven't worked in 3 months. I yell at you for getting promoted. How is that not pathetic?" Rachel took a deep breath. Her turn to be honest. "You want to know the truth? Yeah, this is hard. Really hard. Harder than I thought it would be. And yeah, sometimes I think about leaving. Sometimes I wonder if everyone was right and I'm just being stupid and naive." David's shoulders slumped even more. But Rachel continued, "I'm still here. And you know why? Not because I think you're perfect or because I think I can save you. I'm here because I'm scared to. I'm scared of what happens if I leave you alone right now. I'm scared you'll give up completely. I'm scared I'll regret it forever. And honestly, I'm scared that if I leave now, I'll prove to myself that I'm like everyone else, that I only stick around when things are easy." She turned to face him. "I'm not staying because I'm some kind of saint, David. I'm staying because I believe in us. Even when you don't, even when it's terrible. And I need you to stop punishing me for that." David finally looked at her, really looked at her, and saw what he hadn't been seeing for weeks. She wasn't okay either. She was struggling too. The difference was she'd been struggling quietly while he'd been loud with his pain. "I don't deserve you," he whispered. "That's not the point. This isn't about deserving. It's about choosing. And I keep choosing this. But I need you to make a choice too." "What choice?" "You need to choose to get help, real help. I can't do this alone anymore. I can stand by you, but I can't carry you. There's a difference." That conversation changed something. Not everything David didn't magically get better overnight, but the next day, he asked Rachel to help him find a therapist. He couldn't afford much, but there were some sliding scale options. He made an appointment. He also started getting out of bed, even when he didn't want to. Not every day, but more days than before. He'd force himself to shower, to eat at least one real meal. Baby steps, but steps forward instead of backward. Rachel learned something important during those dark months too. Staying wasn't about being endlessly patient and understanding. It was okay to be angry. It was okay to cry. It was okay to admit she was struggling too. Loving someone through their worst didn't mean pretending it wasn't affecting you. It meant being honest about the weight of it while still choosing to carry it together. They were both breaking rules now. David was breaking the rule that said men should have everything together before they lean on someone. Rachel was breaking the rule that said women should protect themselves above all else. Together, they were breaking the biggest rule of all, that relationships should be easy. And if they're hard, you're doing something wrong. Maybe the opposite was true. Maybe the relationships that required breaking all the rules were the ones worth having. But in those dark hours, it was hard to believe that. It was hard to see past the next day, let alone imagine a future where things would be okay again. 6 months after everything fell apart, something unexpected happened. David got a job offer, not from one of the big prestigious firms. Those doors were still closed. This was a small company, the kind with maybe 20 employees in an office that used to be someone's house. The pay was less than half what he used to make, but it was honest work, real work, and they didn't care about the scandal. His boss, An older man named Tom, who'd started the firm 30 years ago, told him straight up during the interview, "I don't care about your past employer's problems. I care about whether you can do the work and whether you're reliable." "Are you?" David, surprised by the directness, answered honestly. "I'm trying to be. I've been going through a rough time, but I'm working on getting better. I won't lie to you, I've been dealing with depression and therapy. But I show up, and I do my best." Tom nodded. "Good. Honesty matters more than perfection here. When can you start?" Just like that, David had a job again. That first day of work, David was terrified. He put on one of his old suits that hung a bit loose now. He lost weight during the depression and stood in front of the mirror for 10 minutes just breathing. Rachel came up behind him and adjusted his tie. "You've got this," she said. "What if I mess up? What if I'm not ready? Then you'll figure it out, just like we've been figuring everything else out." The job was different from what he was used to. Smaller cases, more personal client interaction, less prestige. But there was something good about it too. The work felt meaningful in a way his old job hadn't. He was helping real people with real problems, small business disputes, contract issues, family matters. At his old firm, everything had been about big corporations and bigger money. Here, he met clients in that converted house office and actually got to know their stories. More importantly, the work gave him structure again, a reason to get up in the morning, a purpose beyond just surviving another day. But getting the job didn't magically fix everything. David was still in therapy, still working through the depression. Some days were better than others. He'd have setbacks, days where getting out of bed felt impossible even with a job waiting. But those days became less frequent. And when they happened, he learned to ask for help instead of hiding it. The real turning point came one evening about 2 months into his new job. David and Rachel were sitting at his sister's kitchen table. They were still living there, saving money to eventually get their own place. They just finished a simple dinner of pasta and vegetables, nothing fancy. "Can we talk about something?" David asked, pushing his plate aside. Rachel tensed slightly. The conversation still made her nervous. But she nodded. "I've been thinking a lot," David started. "About us, about what you did for me, about how everyone told you to leave and you didn't." "David, we've been through this, no? Let me finish." He took a breath. "I spent months thinking I didn't deserve you, that you were too good for me, that you were making a mistake staying with someone like me. And I kept waiting for the moment when I'd be worthy again, when I'd have enough money, enough success, enough stability to deserve your choice to stay." Rachel listened, curious where this was going. "But I realized something. That's not how this works. I might never be what I was before. I might never have that big corner office or the impressive title. This might be at a small firm, a modest life. And if I keep waiting until I'm enough to commit to you properly, I might be waiting forever." He reached across the table and took her hands. "I don't have a ring. I can't afford the kind you deserve right now. And this isn't even a romantic setting. We're in my sister's kitchen eating cheap pasta. But I need to ask you something, and I need to ask it now, before I lose my nerve." Rachel's heart started beating faster. "Will you marry me?" David asked. "Not because I have everything figured out, and not because I think I finally deserve you, but because I want to build a life with you, whatever that life looks like. I want to promise you that I'll show up every day, that I'll keep working on myself, that I'll be your partner through whatever comes next. You broke every rule to stay with me. Now I want to break the rule that says a man needs to have everything together before he commits to someone." Rachel had tears running down her face. "You're really proposing to me in your sister's kitchen? Is that a no?" She laughed through her tears. "It's a yes, you idiot. Of course it's a yes." They kissed across that old kitchen table. And maybe it wasn't the romantic proposal you see in movies, but it was real. It was them, messy and imperfect and honest. David's sister came home 20 minutes later and found them still sitting there, holding hands, talking about what came next. When they told her the news, she cried too. "About time," she said. "I was wondering when you'd stop being stupid and just ask her." The next few months were about building something new, not recovering what was lost. They both realized that was impossible and maybe not even desirable. They were creating a different kind of life together. David kept going to therapy and kept working at the small firm. Rachel kept her job, kept supporting them financially more than David did, and neither of them saw that as a problem anymore. They started looking at small apartments they could afford on their combined income. Nothing fancy, one bedroom, old building. A neighborhood that wasn't trendy but was safe and had a good coffee shop. When they found one that felt right, they signed the lease together. Both names on the contract. Equal partnership, even if the financial contributions weren't exactly equal. Moving into their own place felt like a new beginning. It was small, probably a third the size of David's old apartment, but it was theirs. Rachel hung curtains she'd found at a thrift store. David set up a tiny office corner where he could work on cases at home. They bought mismatched furniture from various secondhand shops and somehow made it all work together. One night, unpacking boxes in their new living room, Rachel found herself thinking about all the rules she'd broken to get here. Don't move in with someone who's unemployed. Don't combine finances during a crisis. Don't sacrifice your own stability for someone else's problems. Don't stay with someone who pushes you away. Every rule she'd been taught about relationships and self-preservation, she'd broken. "What are you thinking about?" David asked, noticing her distant expression. "Just thinking about how we got here," Rachel said. "About all the things people said I shouldn't do. Any regrets?" She looked around their small, imperfect apartment, at the second-hand couch and the curtains that didn't quite match, at David, who'd been through hell and back and was still working every day to be better, at the life they were building together, brick by brick, day by day. "No," she said simply, "no regrets." 2 years after David's life had fallen apart, he and Rachel stood in their apartment getting ready for their wedding. Not the apartment anymore, their apartment. The one they lived in for over a year, the one where they built their actual life together. The wedding was going to be small. They decided to do it at a local community center, nothing fancy. Rachel wore a simple dress she'd found on sale. David wore a suit from his new job wardrobe. They'd invited maybe 40 people, just the ones who really mattered. David's sister was there. Obviously, she'd helped them through everything. Some of David's old friends who'd stayed in touch during the bad times. Rachel's work colleagues who'd supported her. And, surprisingly, Rachel's mother had decided to come. It had taken her the full 2 years to come around. But she'd finally called Rachel 2 months before the wedding and asked if the invitation was still open. "I was wrong," her mother had said on the phone. "I was so sure you were making a mistake. I thought you'd regret it. But you didn't, and maybe I need to trust that you know what you're doing." Some people didn't come. Friends who told Rachel to leave and couldn't admit they'd been wrong. A few of David's old colleagues who still saw him as tainted by the scandal. But that was okay. The people who were there were the ones who'd either supported them, or at least learned to respect their choices. The ceremony itself was short and personal. No elaborate production, no fancy decorations. Just 2 people making promises to each other in front of the people who mattered. When it came time for the vows, David spoke first. His voice shook a little at the start, but steadied as he went on. "Rachel, you stayed when I thought you would leave. When everything in my life fell apart, you chose to fall with me instead of saving yourself. You broke every rule that society says keeps people safe and smart and practical. And I spent a long time not understanding why. I kept waiting for the moment when you'd realize your mistake and walk away." He paused, gathering his thoughts. "But you taught me something important. You taught me that real love isn't about perfect timing or ideal circumstances. It's not about waiting until everything is stable before you commit. Sometimes love means looking at a complete disaster and saying, 'Okay, let's figure this out together.' You chose me when I couldn't choose myself. You believed in us when I'd stopped believing in anything." His voice got rougher, more emotional. "I'm not the same person I was 2 years ago. I don't have the fancy job or the impressive title. I might never have those things again. But I have you, and I have myself back, not the old self, but a different self that I actually like better. A self that knows what really matters." He looked directly at her. "I promise to keep showing up, even on the hard days. I promise to let you in, even when I want to hide. I promise to keep working on myself because you deserve a partner who does that work. And I promise to break whatever rules we need to break to keep building this life together." Rachel was already crying by the time it was her turn. She took a breath and smiled through the tears. "David, when you lost everything, everyone told me to protect myself, to keep my distance, to not let your problems become my problems. And for a while, I questioned whether I was being smart or just being stubborn." She laughed a little. "Turns out I was being stubborn. But I was being stubborn about the right thing." She squeezed his hands. "I didn't stay because I thought I could fix you. I stayed because I believed that what we had together was worth fighting for. Even when the fighting was hard and lonely and everyone thought I was making a mistake. I stayed because I love you, yes, but also because I love who I was when I was with you even during the worst of it." Her voice got stronger. "You think you're the only one who changed? I changed too. I learned what I'm capable of. I learned that I'm braver than I thought. I learned that sometimes the scariest thing and the right thing are the same thing. And I learned that all those rules about self-preservation and boundaries, they work for some people. But they didn't work for us." She looked out at their small group of guests. "Everyone says relationships should be easy, that if you're struggling, you're doing it wrong. But I think that's backward. I think the relationships that require you to grow and stretch and break all your comfortable rules, those might be the ones that matter most." Looking back at David, she finished, "I promise to keep choosing you, even when it's hard. I promise to be honest about when I'm struggling, because partnership isn't about being endlessly strong. I promise to keep breaking whatever rules we need to break to build the life we want, not the life everyone expects us to have." There wasn't a dry eye in that community center. Even David's old boss, Tom, the one who'd given him a chance at the small firm, was wiping his eyes. After the ceremony, during the simple reception, sandwiches and cake from a local bakery, music from someone's playlist, people came up to them with their congratulations. But what David remembered most was what Tom told him. "You know what you to have," Tom said, a plastic cup of punch in his hand. "Something real." Most people are so busy protecting themselves that they never find out what they're actually capable of. You both found out. That's rare. Later that evening, after everyone had left and they were back in their apartment, still in their wedding clothes, David and Rachel sat on their second-hand couch and just breathed. "We did it," Rachel said. "We did." David agreed. "Though I'm pretty sure we did it backward. Usually people get married, then face the hard stuff. We've never been good at doing things the usual way." David thought about that, about how 2 years ago, he'd been sleeping on his sister's couch, sure his life was over. About how Rachel had shown up with her suitcases and her stubborn determination. About all the people who'd said she was making a mistake. About the dark months when he'd pushed her away and she'd refused to go. About learning to build something new instead of trying to recover what was lost. "I'm glad we didn't," he said finally. "Do things the usual way, I mean, because maybe this way, we know what we're made of. We know what we can survive. We build this from the ground up, together." Rachel leaned her head on his shoulder. "You know what's funny? Everyone said I was sacrificing everything for you, but I don't feel like I sacrificed anything. I feel like I gained something, like I found out who I really am. The me who stays. The me who fights. The me who breaks rules when the rules don't make sense. And who's that?" She smiled. "Someone I actually like. Someone I'm proud of being." They sat there in comfortable silence for a while, both thinking about the journey that had brought them here. It wasn't the life David had planned 2 years ago. It wasn't the life anyone would have predicted. It was smaller, simpler, built on different foundations than what they'd started with. But it was theirs. Built from broken pieces and stubborn love and the willingness to ignore everyone who said they were doing it wrong. Built by choosing each other every single day, even when it would have been easier not to. Built by breaking all the rules that said you should protect yourself first and commit only when everything is perfect. "You know what I think," David said eventually. "I think maybe the strongest relationships aren't the ones that are easy from the start. Maybe they're the ones where you have to fight for each other and figure things out together, and refuse to quit when everyone says you should, Or maybe, Rachel added, they're the ones where you learn that loving someone isn't about waiting for the perfect moment. It's about making a choice over and over to show up and stay and build something together. Even when it's hard, she turned to look at him. We broke every rule. Everyone said I should leave. Everyone said you weren't ready to commit. Everyone had an opinion about how we should handle things. And we ignored all of it. Do you think that makes us brave or just stubborn? Maybe both, she laughed. Definitely both. As they sat there in their small apartment on their wedding night, they both understood something important. The hard times hadn't just been something to survive, they'd been the foundation of what they built. The struggle hadn't weakened their relationship. It had shown them exactly what they were capable of together. Everyone wants a love story that's easy and perfect from the start. But sometimes the most meaningful stories are the ones where you have to fight for them, where you have to break rules and ignore advice and trust yourself when everyone says you're wrong, where you learn that love isn't just about the good times, it's about showing up during the bad times and choosing each other anyway. David and Rachel's story wasn't about a man being saved by a woman or about sacrifice and martyrdom. It was about two people who decided their relationship was worth fighting for. When everything suggested they should give up, it was about breaking the rules that said you should always protect yourself first, that relationships should be easy, that you should only commit when circumstances are perfect, and in breaking those rules, they'd found something more valuable than the perfect love story everyone else expected. They'd found a real one.